All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Q&A with Tech Services. I'm Olivia Radcliffe, and I am here with the amazing, absolutely incomparable Dr. Gustavo Barca. Gustavo, who are you
Hello,
and what do you do?
everybody. It's a pleasure being here again. Dr. V speaking. And I guess we have a cool topic to talk about today.
I sure hope so. No, so today we wanted to talk about material exposures, just what they are, why you need them, how they go down at e-beam. So do you want to kind of get in with, first off, what in the world is a material exposure?
Yeah, so by definition, material exposure basically, in simple words, it means we're exposing the material to the beam at specific doses and specific scenarios, right? That can be pretty simple, but that can be pretty complex depending on the dose range, if we're looking at different dose rates and all of that, right? So it can get complicated. It can also be very simple. But the goal of the material exposure most of the time is about material compatibility, right? We can also call it material compatibility testing. So when people are converting from one sterilization modality to another, they want to make sure the product will still perform, right? So they need to go through a material compatibility testing. So that can be pretty common when you're coming from a gas variation, gas sterilization technology, a gas-based technology to radiation-based technology. That's often required when
Like
you're
ETO to e-beam.
ETO, nioxalizer, those other gas modalities for sterilization. You need to do that to make sure the parts will perform. Um, but they are also common when you're moving from gamma to e-beam. They can be also be considered an option because you're looking for different dose rates, right? It's similar, it's the same, but not the same, right? They can behave very differently. Materials can behave very differently when exposed to different radiation
What
modalities.
is the difference between dose and dose rate?
So dose is the amount of energy that will be delivered to the product, or the amount of energy the product will absorb upon the exposure. Dose rate is the amount of dose per time. So, for example, when we talk about electron beam radiation, we can talk about delivering, let's say, the standard. I'm going to use the word standard, but you scientists out there, don't throw tomatoes at me. The standard sterilization dose for medical device, let's assume it's 25. Uh, in a gamma chamber, that can take 2.5 hours or a little bit longer. When you compare it to electron beam processing, it can take about a minute or a little bit longer, right? So it's a different magnitude, right? And that's the dose rate. Is not the final dose, not the absorbed dose. It's the amount of dose delivered as a function of time, right? So therefore, when you're switching even from one e-beam type of electron beam accelerator to another, some people like to run that test, right?
How does the varying dose rate affect the product? So if like gamma has a slower dose rate than e-beam, how does that change?
So there are multiple ways of answering that. I'm going to try to take easiest path.
Like the easy route? Okay.
Yes. For example, if we're talking about polymers, when we're doing material modification, um, most of the reactions that will happen in the product, right, will depend on radicals. So you transfer the energy from the accelerator or from a gamma cobalt 60 source to your material. That will generate radicals, that will generate reactive species inside the product. And the amount of species generated, the yield, and their ability to interact will dictate the changes you're inducing to your material. Whether they're good or bad, that will change. So when you do it super fast, most of the time there's not a lot of reactions that will happen because there's not enough material radicals being generated and consumed because it's too fast. A good example is oxygen derived radicals. If oxygen diffusion plays a role, if you do it super fast, well, there's not going to be enough time for the recombination to happen. If you do it super slow, there's time for radicals to be formed, radicals to be recombined, radicals to be attacking neighboring atoms and molecules. You know what I mean? So it changes completely. There are products that prefer to be beamed or processed as fast as possible, and products that benefit of going super slow. because then you allow it to react to it, and it doesn't get detrimental effects. So both scenarios can happen. But
So there could be less degradation. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So there could be less degradation with e-beam then.
yes, it's one of that's why sometimes people will say that electron beam technology is more polymer friendly, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit nicer to materials because you have the ability to tune the dose, and you can always deliver the dose at the same dose rate, right? Um, but again, so the material compatibility test will enable you to understand if your product will respond well in terms of absorbed dose once you deliver the dose to the product, and also enable you to understand different approaches. Should I slow down this process? Should I do it in different passes? What should we do, right? um, Here at eBeam, what we do, we typically suggest a few doses when a customer brings a product to us that he's not sure about the compatibility of it with the technology. And we would do the dose that's the dose the customer believes is the right for sterilization, so that he can see the as a trial what his product's going to look like, right? So that's the first dose we select. And then we do a simulation to a max dose testing. So we look at the product and say, hey, this in a box configuration, depending on whatever the dimensions of the box are, this should lead to a DUR, a dose uniformity ratio, which basically is the ratio between minimum and max dose. And so if my dose is 15 kilogram, my sterilization dose is 15, my DUR is 2, we're looking at a max of 30 kilogram. So what we do is we'll do a 15 exposure, and we'll do exposure at 30, because then we also take the customer can also evaluate the effects at the max dose, right? Of course, until you finish the dose map, you will never know what exactly is your max, but it gives the customer an idea, right? If a box configuration will lead to a 60 kilogram max dose, my product cannot respond well above 50, well, that's a no-go, right? So we always combine both.
Okay. So do products have to go through a material exposure, or is it just kind of a nice to have?
No, not necessarily. Not if you're sometimes they're converting products from e-beam to e-beam. That's not needed. You still have to do a dose map as long as it meets the same criteria. It's fine. The challenge is, Olivia, sometimes people are not assessing. Sorry for not the right pronunciation. They're not assessing the product max. They're basing the max dose on the outcome of a experiment. They're not really looking to see how much dose can that material withstand. So, for example, in the gamma world, they would just see whatever the gamma ratio is going to be based on the cobalt penetration, and they say that's your product max. No, that's what the gamma technology can lead to. Your product can probably tolerate a lot more, right? And so sometimes we have that scenario too, where we have to do the max dose testing to evaluate that if the window is too short. If we have a broader window, sometimes that's not even necessary because the product was already validated. One thing I do want to say is when we're talking about material modification, sometimes what we do is we do this material compatibility testing, but we do a different window of doses so that we can identify what dose is best to induce the reaction the customer is looking for. If it's cross-linking, if it's branching, if it's chain scissioning. So we do a wide range of doses, and then we fine-tune them as we move forward, right? To be able to get to the precise modification that the customer is asking for.
What about products that just want almost an extreme level of dose? They just want to see that really extreme dosage, like in the nuclear industry and such.
Yeah, then the goal is really to demonstrate that the material will be able to withstand all the doses that, for example, that it will be exposed to in a nuclear reactor. Then we really have to simulate hours, right? Hours of those, and that's a nice scenario you bring up, because sometimes we're able to tune up the machines to a similar level of radiation that would be generated in those facilities. So we end up doing 20 hours, tests of 20 hours, tests of 10 hours, right? And when we take a look at it, sometimes we slow down the process to mimic the same scenario. And basically, what they're trying to do is take a peek at see what's going to happen in the end of the line once their product is fully assembled. How long is it going to take, right? So that helps them understand that as well.
So if that's 20 hours or something like that, for context, how long does it take to do kind of a routine normal material exposure at, like, I don't know, 25 and 50 kilogray?
So that's relatively quick, right? It depends on the energy, because the machines at eBeam sources here, we can tune the energy of the machine. We don't have to process everything at the max energy of the equipment. So lower energies will allow us to deliver more dose per time, right? So it really depends. We can have passes of 25 kilogray, we can have passes of 40 kilogray, passes of 50 kilogray, right? So we can be talking in the magnitude of minutes to hours, right? And in some cases, weeks, because I think we've had a customer a couple of times that was doing multiple days of exposure to be able to get to the dose they were looking for. Yeah. I hope I answered it.
Yeah. So if someone wants to do a material exposure and they have no idea where to get started, what doses, anything like that, you'll help determine what doses they need to test, et cetera.
Yes. We will do a technical evaluation on the product, understand what the components are. And depending, some customers are not looking for any modification. They just want the material sterilized, right? But if not, if they say, hey, I'm looking for cross-linking, we'll try to look and identify the best doses to cross-link the material or the molecules they have in their compounds, right? Then from there, we can use literature or previous experiences, and then we'll suggest a few doses for the customer. If the customer agrees, that's what we do. Sometimes that can be pretty straightforward. Sometimes it requires some special handling in terms of temperature, right? Using dry ice or performing the beaming at heated conditions. Sometimes we have to play with atmosphere, but those are specific scenarios, right? And tools that we're able to offer depending on the product.
Okay, great. I think that was a good, short, sweet overview. Is there anything else you want to add in there?
No, I guess just the importance of material compatibility tests are on the rise with the challenges that the marketing is facing, with availability of cobalt or availability of ethylene oxide. So it's important for people to be aware that the material compatibility testing can give them good answers before they decide on choosing what's the best sterilization modality, right? The best time to evaluate the right sterilization modality is when you're developing the product, because once you have it done, you've got to work with whatever you have. So we're happy to help those people too, but if people can start thinking about the terminal sterilization method during the development phase, it would just be a dream and easier for everybody.
Perfect. I loved it. Okay, so if you are developing a product right now, reach out to Gustavo. But no, if you have any questions about your products, material exposures, or material compatibility test, same thing, reach out to eBeam at ebeamservices.com or visit ebeamservices.com, and you can book a call in with Gustavo, and he'll walk through all the stuff with you. All right. All right. We'll see you all next time. Take care.
Well, thank you. Bye.